Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Being at Your Best When Your Kids Are at Their Worst. Practical Compassion in Parenting by Kim John Payne, M.Ed. Narrated by Brion. Introduction. No parent plans to get angry. It just happens. Afterward, we usually feel awful about what took place. But what is it like to live in a home where a parent's frustration regularly boils over? Here is a story recounted by an adult looking back at their childhood and the knowledge they gained from the unpredictable environment they navigated. Even though the circumstances described are harsh, it may help us to see through the eyes of a child. You'll hear the story of this 10-year-old as they try to make sense of their own parents struggling with emotional self-regulation. A child's view. My mother suffered with some health issues that understandably kept her from being able to keep up with the demands of life. She moved with difficulty, frustration, and pain. I can barely imagine, in retrospect, how she struggled to raise us kids, as well as be an attentive wife and the main caregiver for her own elderly parents. She had high standards for herself, her children, and every other aspect of her life. She could be quite creative when figuring out how to keep up her homemaking ideals in spite of her debilitating condition. I remember coming home one day to see her vacuuming the floor with the hose taped to her walker. Good idea, but it meant she had to walk backward and forward dozens of times throughout the entire house to get every speck off the carpet. It must have been painful and exasperating, but she got the job done. When we finally convinced her decades later to allow us to hire a professional cleaner, it only made things worse. She insisted on cleaning every last inch of the home before she could let the woman through the door. It wasn't that she was obsessive. This was just how she kept up appearances. Many women of her generation shared this trait. Nevertheless, there was a dark side to her struggles. She often became enraged and directed her anger toward me. I have no doubt the contrary child I probably was exasperated her and often tested her patience as she met the many responsibilities of her daily work. But some of my most vivid childhood memories involve being strapped with a thick leather belt. This was not an unusual punishment for kids in those days. When this happened, I would float somewhat out of my body, see her contorted face, and even look with wonder and an almost eerie calm at the whole scene. But the hurtful sting of her words when she told me what a horrible child I was, how my future was going to be hopeless, cut more deeply than the bite of the strap. This treatment finally ended when I was 10 years old and able to stand up for myself. One day I triggered her by doing something I can't even remember, but it must have been provocative. And as she reached for the belt, I looked her straight in the eye and said, "If you hit me again, I will hit you back just as hard. After that, you will never see me again." And in my own 10-year-old imagination, I meant it. I'd made elaborate plans to move in with a kind relative and had money for a bus ticket and a packed bag hidden and at the ready. Of course, I didn't hit her, thank goodness, but my threat shocked her, and she cried. Weirdly, I felt bad for upsetting her. The hitting stopped after that, and the shouting and shaming lessened, but a gulf between us opened up. I have often wondered whether my mother suffered from rage that once released could not be controlled. I have heard a definition of addiction as being an increasing and compulsive tendency to avoid pain, boredom, silence, inner development, and moral responsibility by displacing it with outer stimulation. Rage can most certainly be taking it out on someone else, a clear form of outer stimulation. In my mother's case, her verbal and physical aggression may have helped her avoid facing that something was not right in her life. A person who shouts loudly enough, blames and shames others long enough, is probably trying to avoid having to face his or her own demons. After these outbursts took place, little was said. It was as if nothing had occurred. It would make any child wonder, did that really happen? Like so many other children in these kinds of situations, it never occurred to me to tell anybody about what was going on. And as odd as it may sound, I would have settled for even a small signal that she was sorry for her outbursts. A brief and gentle touch afterward that suggested remorse and a wish to reconnect would have meant everything. It never came, and as a result, our relationship floundered, which lasted into my adult years. When I became a parent, I was forced to confront my own emotions. It surprised me how little was needed to tip frustration over into anger, and I most certainly did not want to dwell there. I began to grasp my mother's parenting struggles. and slowly over time I developed the ability to understand what prompted her hurtful words and actions. I wish those years of harshness had never happened, but the silver lining was that I experienced what it's like to be in the presence of an adult who could not control her emotions as she would have liked to. Most importantly, it planted in my heart the determination to do whatever I could to not go down that angry road. It also helped me realize the absolute necessity of making relational repairs when things go wrong, and the cost when this does not happen. I have heard it said, "You can't give what you did not get." In other words, if my parent was not there for me, I cannot be there for my kids. But I don't see it that way. When our babies are born and first placed in our arms, we are not thinking about our past and what we did not get. The unspoken challenge right in that moment is to begin to find capacities in ourselves that we probably never knew we had to stay present, and to keep showing up to love this little vulnerable child even when he or she pushes us and we have to reach deep inside to find caring and protecting capacities we never knew we possessed. Building the ark before the flood. Have you ever found yourself in a situation in which your kid has pushed your buttons and you begin to lose it? You can hear yourself, but there seems no way to stop. The frustrated, forceful voice you are using with your child comes out of some strange stress regress. You hear yourself speaking just like your mother or father did when they were having a rough time with you as a kid. Back then you swore you'd never talk to your own kids like that when you grew up. But here you are, using the same words in the same steely tone. And as if seeing yourself act this way were not bad enough, you are now both mad at your kids and angry with yourself. You secretly wish someone would step in and rescue you. But if a friend or partner does try to intercede, you snap, "I'm fine. Would you leave me alone?" This is the action-reaction cycle of emotional habits, which leaves parent and child filled with anger and shame in family homes across the world. Your kids do or say something that is edgy. You remind them that it is unacceptable and ask them to stop. Rather than quit, they either deflect or ignore you, and they may even ramp it up a bit. You hold it together for a while, but you can feel that red mist rising. The irritation boils over, and you react. Now you have their attention, but you also get that awful feeling that everything is speeding up and this is not going to be good. What if there was a way to break this cycle? What if you could shift the entrenched feelings of antipathy that arise toward your child, who seems to have an unerring ability to trigger you? Wouldn't it be a relief to know that right at the moment tension begins, you had the capacity to find your own voice and stand on firm ground, rather than acting out unresolved issues from your own biography? The good news: there is a way to achieve this. As most parents know, charged confrontations blow up fast in a family. A positive alternative would have to kick in right when things are starting to escalate, and it needs to develop into an emotional muscle memory, to become a new reflex that communicates to a child that you are coming from a different place, a space in which you have become centered, firm, and loving, even when your child is being reckless and provoking you. Making the repairs. Life happens, conflicts flare up, and at times we lose it. Our frustration boils over, and we say or do something that comes out of anger. No matter how justified the words, the way we spoke them does not feel right. This is just not the kind of parent we want to be. You wish the scene had not happened, but it did. Rather than getting stuck in shame and enduring hours or even days of hurt feelings and awkward silences, by using the practices set out in this book, you will be able to quickly settle yourself down. They will allow you to integrate your frustrations, get in touch with your caring and balanced self, and crucially, make the repair with your child within a short span of time so that the day and your relationship get back on track. Breaking free of parenting highs and lows. The parenthood journey leads us to the heights and depths of emotional experience. Rebounding between these extremes is inevitable and even bearable for a short while, but it's not sustainable. When living through these highs and lows, we may begin to feel that all we are doing is surviving, reacting to whatever each day throws our way. How can we develop the capability to find a firm and fun middle ground when life is overwhelming us? What comes at us as parents will be unpredictable, but we can control how and where we meet these situations. It is possible to break our patterns of emotional compression and recoil, action and reaction, And although it may sound counterintuitive, the way to begin is by looking at our parenting trigger points and befriending the feelings of frustration and inadequacy that so disorient us. We also need to be able to pause and acknowledge that we often get it right. We can lift ourselves up by remembering that things can go well and that we can be funny, loving, and even brilliant with our kids. The early chapters of Being at Your Best When Your Kids Are at Their Worst will shed light on the most common ways parents get provoked. I will suggest practical strategies that deal directly with provocative situations and help us understand what issues are percolating just under the surface and binding us to a nasty cycle. The book will then focus in on the compassionate response practice, which gently but powerfully opens up and broadens the pathways within us, leading us to the acceptance that we can be frustrated and fabulous, that both are perfectly okay. It is called a practice because that is just what it is. We work at it. We prepare for the inevitable times in family life when things don't go well. The practice helps you remove old unwanted emotional clutter and allows you to tune in to your intuition. By connecting to your inner voice, you will find that the words you speak to your child can come from a place of greater compassion and clarity. After all, it's not just the fun things we do with our children that help build healthy relationships. How we handle the storms and struggles is what will ultimately define us in the eyes of our kids. We are always holding our kids. It's a matter of how. A parent once said to me, "When my kids are not doing well, I really struggle. I don't know when to step in and sort things out and when to step back to let them work things through. As a result, I feel hesitant, and my kids pick up on that." Focusing on these two options, whether to step in or to step back, is too limiting an approach. Instead, we want to shift the way we look at how to respond to flashpoint moments by recognizing that we are always holding our kids emotionally. Sometimes we have a light touch and can give them space to work things out because they are doing well. But at other times, we need to draw them near and hold them close so they can feel the security of our boundaries and the warmth of our support. Most of the time, we are just getting on with our family days. In these moments, our holding should be moderate in nature. But this middle ground alternative is a good place from which to tighten up or provide more space as the need arises. Finding your own voice. The heart-based strategies in Being at Your Best When Your Kids Are at Their Worst opens up a much wider range of responses than we might be accustomed to and helps us avoid 4 classic misguided parenting strategies. 1. It offers us a way out of anxiety-driven helicopter parenting in which we hover over our kids and create too much turbulence. 2. It helps us avoid tentatively leaving them to it, which so often creates unintended disconnection. 3. It gives us ways to avoid jumping in with both boots on, a forceful approach our kids can perceive as threatening or overreactive. 4. It provides us with a practical way to observe what's happening and confidently determine whether to hold a situation firmly or moderately, or decide that a soft touch is all that's needed. When we become confident that we often strike the right tone with our struggling kids, or at least one that is not wildly discordant, we thicken and strengthen the bonds of our relationship. Trust builds. Rather than push us away when they are disoriented and frustrated, our kids will lean into us because they know we are a safe emotional harbor, a place where they can rest and regroup. When they are angry, they are vulnerable. Although this book is called Being at Your Best When Your Kids Are at Their Worst, what we as parents want above all is to be at our most loving when our kids are at their most vulnerable. When a child, tween, or teen becomes deeply angry and upset, the layers of their being peel back, exposing deeper needs and sensitivities. It is at this very moment that what we say and do really matters, because it will penetrate right to their inner being. This is why our most vivid childhood memories are often about difficult times we suffered through and how our parents handled those things, roughly or with sensitivity and care. The overriding aim of Being at Your Best is to help you to find balance and create a safe space for you and your child to pause and reorient during these defining parenting moments. Practically, you will learn that this book is presented in 3 sections. Part 1 explores the derailments that prevent you from being the parent you want to be. We will go over what may be triggering you to get stuck within old unwanted action-reaction habits with your kids. Part 2 takes a deep dive into the compassionate response practice, which is a visualization and meditation that powerfully works to integrate your frustrations and struggles with a child's behavior that is pressing your buttons while encouraging you not to forget that you can be a kind, caring, funny, and competent parent. Part 3 details the transformative outcomes you can experience in finding your own calm, competent voice. What you will hear in these chapters is less a traditional self-help book and more a map to a journey within yourself, where you can find a place in which you feel good about your parenting on a day-to-day basis. As your kids grow up and out into the world, you will have a feeling that you have done a solid job and that your overarching hope for them will be achieved, that they will be okay. Part 1. The Problem. What gets in the way of being at our best? In this section, we go over what pushes our buttons and why. We will explore how we can be on the family dance floor, but also at the same time on the objective balcony, our reactive habits, or what I call repetitive emotional strain injuries, and how to heal them, what your body-based response to family tensions can tell you, how conflict avoidance or harmony addiction and other responses we have to challenging family situations may have their roots in our own upbringing, the reasons our kids test us out and push us, feeling unseen and undervalued, and practical strategies to establish appreciation, how the 4 pillars of simplifying family life can create more calm and balance in day-to-day life when it all gets to be too much, how to target what is within your influence to change, and staying close to your family values. 1. The balcony and the playground. My students pulled open the door to the little shed. "Yes," they shouted. "It's a really big tangle." The rope they stared at was no ordinary rope. It was bright orange and a couple of 100 yards long. We used it to mark out our play area for games class. I'd learned early on in my teaching career that some elementary-age kids playing tag would rather run to the next town than get caught, so marking a boundary was a professional necessity. My colleague also used the rope, but often ran out of time at lesson's end, and rather than store it neatly, dumped it into the shed in a spectacular tangled mess. So my class became expert at the art of untangling. In fact, they looked forward to it. They even timed themselves to see how quickly they could do it. They devised 2 ways to go about it. For the first, we'd send a couple of children up to the tower attached to the schoolhouse building. This little tower had a balcony from which you could get a great view of the playground. The kids would look down and from their bird's eye view call out helpful instructions to the scrum of untanglers below. The second detangling trick the children learned was never pull on a knot. If you do so, the rope gets badly matted and becomes nearly impossible to use. Instead, they made sure to open each tangle up to create more and more space. With time and effort, the jumble unraveled, and the children would let out a triumphant collective hoot. The kids called this chore, which they had transformed into a fun activity, the naughty game. A being at your best tool, the tangle and tensions of emotions. The metaphors of the kids' untangling techniques are striking. We can apply these same simple principles to all of our relationships, and in particular to parenting situations. When we find ourselves in a tangle of emotions with our kids, what to do? Step 1. Climb the tower and get out on the balcony. First of all, we need some objectivity. Not easy to find, I know, but essential. It's helpful to climb up into our own parenting tower, stand on the balcony, and witness what is playing out. What needs are not being met that are causing tensions to flare up? This does not mean we detach ourselves from the following activity. Instead, we can guide it with a more expansive perspective. From that vantage point, we can be more helpful. We can identify a snarl that may be forming and call down instructions rather than blindly make a mess of a situation and not be able to do anything about it. As one mother of 3 children put it, what helps is that my thinking and observations can influence what I am doing before things get out of control. Here is a practical way to stand on the balcony without signaling to a child or teen that you are disconnected and aloof. Connect. I can see this is hard for us. Altering your first response changes the direction of an exchange with your kids. Opening a conversation with an "I can see" statement sends the message that you have been watching. It also reassures everyone that you are not getting angry. Most importantly, it subtly reinforces to your child that you are a loving family. Here are a few other examples. I can see this is not going so well. I can see this really bothers you. I can see that you probably need some space now. We can find out what is bothering you a little later. Step 2. On the playground, opening the tangle. It is so easy to get entangled in blame and frustration. That's when we tug too hastily on the ropes and feel constricted. The more we pull, the tighter a situation knots up, until our family ends up in a matted, restrictive mess. Any possible solution to the problem gets lost in the snarl of misunderstanding and anger. What we need to do instead is open up space in the knots. Get their perspective. Can you help me understand how you see it? The truth of any situation is a journey, not a destination. Kids have their own perspectives on how a hard situation has come about. Too often, we presume how we see something is the way it is. As adults, we tend to be more objective and grasp more of the bigger picture than our kids, but we can parent more effectively when we pause and ask them for their viewpoint. It's always better to hear them out first, rather than jumping into problem-solving mode. The question I like to ask is, can you help me understand how you see it? If there are 2 or 3 people involved, you can add, the way you see it is probably different from how your brothers or I do. That is normal and fine. If it is just you and your child in a muddle, explain that seeing things differently is normal. It helps you both maintain your truth and stay connected to your child, because by allowing different perspectives, you are promoting mutual respect. If siblings are involved, it's common for them to battle to gain your allegiance, and things can escalate quickly. Using the second statement stops them from trying to recruit you over to their side by insisting that they are the only one telling the truth and the other siblings are lying. Change your tone. It is not what is said, but the way it is spoken. The 2 previous strategies, I can see and can you help me understand, help take the edge off your tone, which your kids are so sensitive to. Most of all, it helps you in a very practical way shift to a different place within yourself. Rather than falling into an all-too-familiar escalation pattern, you can stand on that objective balcony and at the same time engage with your kids at the playground level. It was endearing to watch the kids struggle and work things through in the knotty game. Even though they knew that pulling on a knot did not work, some children could not resist doing it. Each time that happened, someone would say, "Don't pull, it only makes it worse," or "Give it more space." One 9-year-old girl called out, "Don't choke it, let it breathe." That's exactly what we aim to do when we coach ourselves to observe ourselves and our family from the tower balcony while engaging lovingly with them in the playground at the same time. 2. Healing a repetitive emotional strain injury. A strong parallel can be made between how we treat problem areas in our bodies and how we can best work with the emotional bruises of day-to-day parenting. Physical or occupational therapists typically treat a problem area in 2 ways. First, they try to determine what repetitive action is causing muscle inflammation or wear and tear on the joints. When particular repeated movements have become a bad habit, known as a movement blind spot, they need to be corrected if the body is to heal. Second, therapists massage the surrounding area to relax adjacent muscles, rather than pushing and poking the injured spot itself, which would hurt too much and likely cause additional inflammation. They do this to keep the tension from spreading and to create a more relaxed space so that the inflammation can dissipate. In our family relationships, we often have behavioral blind spots, things we do over and over that cause emotional inflammation. By becoming aware of these bad habits, we can begin to understand the cause of the pain and contemplate changes we might make. Here are 3 examples of bad habits we can bring to light. Provocative or sarcastically tinged communication styles, unintended put-downs, overly assertive questioning. Though we may not interact with our children in these ways intentionally, they will nonetheless respond to such patterned behavior by becoming defiant or withdrawn. I call these reactions pushback or fallback. We have triggered in them a need to protect themselves from us. When we repeatedly poke at a problem situation with a family member, we cause emotional irritation to flare up. Granted, our kids' behaviors can be annoying at times, especially when they do the same thing over and over. But getting frustrated and forcefully telling a child, "You are acting like a baby," or "You are the oldest and you should know better," simply escalates the tension. You and your child have clearly developed a relationship sore spot. Rather than prod at it, try to create space around it. A subtle shift in your emotional reflexes can produce remarkable results. When author and business marketing expert David Levin looks at campaigns he has implemented that did not go as well as he expected, he resists the temptation to dump everything and start again. Instead, he says, "Most often what I need to do is figure out what I didn't see and make a tiny 2-degree directional change. Then, so often, everything begins to flow properly." The same can be true with parenting. If we can find out where we need to make those little 2-degree pivots and implement them, we can open up healthier pathways to connecting in our families. A being at your best tool: fever-based sensitivity. Our kids are so attuned to us that little is needed to breathe more space into our relationships with them. This is particularly true if your connection with your child has become emotionally fevered. They are already on high alert, so any positive change you make will be perceived immediately and quickly produce de-escalation. After all, everyone wants to be relaxed and feel safe. It may take time to heal, but a shift is definitely underway. As one dad with 2 teenagers confided, "I'd got into the habit of making sarcastic comments like, 'Oh, here we go again.' I didn't mean it as a put-down, and it seemed a lot better than shouting, but my kids reacted badly to it every time. I kept justifying my reaction by telling my wife, 'Well, they started.' 'You sound like a child,' she would reply, which didn't lead to a great conversation either. The moment I showed a flicker of self-restraint and shifted my attitude, something amazing happened. When I said, 'Okay, tell me what's bugging you about this,' they just opened up, like they'd been waiting forever for me to quit going at them." We will go more deeply into how to avoid pulling on a knot or poking at a sore spot in Part 2 of this book, which explores the compassionate response practice in detail. However, you can use what you have just heard as an emotional early warning detection system right now. Here's how it works. A being at your best tool: the clinch. We often sense when a problem or an argument is coming. Disagreements smolder and build up over time, but even when they flare up quickly, we have a few seconds to brace for impact. Many people describe a clinching feeling they get when they sense a fight coming on. It's an instinctual human reaction. One mother told me it's like being squeezed, but not at all in a good way. The next time you are headed into an argument with your partner or kids, pause for a moment and consider what form your clinching takes. Try as best you can to climb up onto that balcony and see yourself and how you react. Notice where in your body you feel the clinch and the qualities it has. For example, you may feel your shoulders raise and tighten, or maybe your hands ball up into fists. Some parents have mentioned they feel a tightening in their throat, and as a result their voice feels and sounds constricted. Personally, I notice that I tend to lock my knees in a brace for impact type of stance. If that is too hard to do in the moment, then mull it over afterward. If you can motivate yourself to perform this self-check, something small but significant can happen. Just like the occupational therapist who identifies what physical action is stressing a problem area, you are shining a spotlight on an unconscious emotional habit. You won't be able to completely change your reactions every time, but you will likely be able to de-escalate situations more often. The more your awareness increases, the greater your chances of avoiding repetitive emotional strain injuries. Most often, our body's physical reaction to a stressful situation comes first, and words flood in second. Yes, things happen quickly, but it is possible to train yourself to note when your body starts to lock itself into a clenching pattern. This can serve as a warning signal that provocative words are about to come out of your mouth. The brain science is pretty clear. The moment you go into your observing brain, you can override your fight or flight brain. The small pause you create is all important to your ability to break free of old, unhealthy emotional habits. In a nutshell, you have just set up an early warning system that will help keep you from overtaxing a small group of emotional muscles. Instead, your parenting exchanges will be carried out by a much wider range of emotional muscles, and at the end of the day, as you lie down in bed, you'll feel tired but pleased by a family day well lived. 3. Derailments from the past. stuff accumulates. Most of the time, family life just chugs.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?